Funding for the river, Living the St. Lawrence, provided by Mattress Express, your instant comfort number bed dealer for Northern and Central New York. Online at mattressexpressny.com. Marble Key Realty, there for you 24/7, serving the unique needs of North Country homeowners. Online at marblekey.com. Big Apple Music, your car audio specialist, who also specialize in custom home theater and business networking. Online at rockbybigapple.com. Armageddon Arsenal Supply, exercising our Second Amendment rights, located on Route 11 near the Fort Drum main gate. Tremblay's Handyman Services, supporting production of the River, Living the St. Lawrence series. And by Lake Ontario Realty. Serving the region for 18 years, Lake Ontario Realty is once again the volume leader in Northern New York for the 4th straight year. Serving all of Northern New York, including the St. Lawrence River and the Eastern Ontario communities. See them on Facebook and online at lakeontariorealty.com.
Today on the river, Living the St. Lawrence. It's part 2. The guys are back to talk about the history of the St. Lawrence River again. They continue to talk about the famous people who lived on it, the castles they lived in, the hotels they built, and the many tales and stories passed down over the generations.
Jane Fonda's mother spent the last few years of her life in Ogdensburg. And she was buried in Ogdensburg. So I believe, Henry Fonda would have been her husband. Peter and Jane, their kid.
It's amazing you know that, Alex.
Producers Josh Todd and Alex Hammond wanted to create a show that was solely dedicated to the St. Lawrence River. That's why they created a roundtable discussion with host Glenn Curry to talk about the river's rich history, its contributions to world trade, and its growing popularity with the best anglers on the planet. That's today on the river, Living the St. Lawrence. On our last episode, the guys talked about the river's rich and profound history that included a magnificent hotel fire on the Frontenac Island and other incredible stories about the greatest river in the world. Let's rejoin them for part 2 of the history of the St. Lawrence River.
Bill Johnson, I'm sure you guys heard about the famous pirate, and not to mention Pirate Days on the river. What do you want to share about him? Legendary guy.
Legendary guy. I know he's quite a history. He's a caretaker of a Sunken Rock lighthouse, if I'm not mistaken, one of the lighthos.
After he
escaped. He was the letter of the law eventually found him. He was put in prison. He escaped prison by making a key out of zinc, and I can't remember where he went ashore, but he escaped in a log. He stayed in a log for about 3 days, I think, while the authorities were looking for him, and made his way back south to the U.S.
The only reason why I know the story is because on my Robinson side, my mother's side of the family, before we came over here, we were Irish Canadian. So when the potato famine happened, we went to Canada. We didn't come through Ellis Island.
A lot of people did.
So
a lot of by way of Montreal.
Yeah. So my ancestor Abraham Robinson was actually called to arms for the Canadian side. He was part of the Canadian militia. So there were British regulars in the Canadian militia that were fighting against these it was like 100 Americans that were led by Johnston and a bunch of Canadians who were, trying to revolutionize against the crown, like we did, almost 100 years before.
Right.
And it went horribly.
It didn't go well.
I think that's when he was running from the from the law.
I know he sacked a vessel near either Chippewa Bay or a little bit upriver. He was supposed to get like 100 conscripts, like you said, and no one showed up. So I think it was like 13 men overtook the ship. They couldn't manage it themselves after sacking it, and they screamed out, "Remember the Caroline," which is a throwback to some British ship that they were trying to avenge. I know that. But they didn't have enough people to man that ship. They ended up burning it and sinking it. But that was essentially what he was on the lam for, is getting a little rebellion going, taking that ship, and in a protest to whatever happened with the Caroline. We could dig that up further, but then he was on the run.
And we talked earlier about Charles Emery, and again, if you can elaborate on that, Josh. Interesting irony in that he was a hotel builder, and he built it on Frontenac Island. And unfortunately, here it is. He was a tobacco guy, and yet the hotel burned down due to cigarette smoking.
Yeah, that's an interesting turn of fate. So from my research, they had a man named George Morse. He was attorney in Clayton. He was representing C.G. Emery. So Morse had bought a lot of properties and islands along the St. Lawrence. Ended up selling some to Charles Emery. One of those islands was Round Island. He decided to build a hotel on that island called Frontenac, and it was the place to be for the turn of the century folks that would come up here and vacation. And I think we're upwards of 5+ floors with some dormers, and it was a multi-million-dollar hotel. And Charles Emery stemmed from the American Tobacco Company. In a strange twist of fate or irony, one of the helpers or one of the staff was smoking and didn't extinguish a cigarette in the hotel in one of the wings, and ended up burning the entire place down by way of a cigarette. So you just can't make this stuff up.
No, you
just can't.
No. But what's fascinating, one thing we didn't talk about, is Fineview, the small community right there on Wellesley Island.
Very
now,
nice place.
Very famous people obviously live there, including Abby Hoffman, who was he changed his real name was Barry Freed. His last name was Freed. It escapes me at the moment, but nonetheless, he was a radical during the '60s, and he kind of went into oblivion. But he lived with a model, beautiful woman up there in Fineview. If you've ever been to Fineview, and I know you have been, is that the closest thing to a story town, Josh, than you've ever seen before? It's amazing.
Best way to describe it is pastel-colored houses with
Beautiful
canvas on their porches. And if I ever do an outside sitting porch, I'm definitely going to cover it in canvas and make it like a 3 Seasons room. But it's just its own little place, and there's golf carts everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Just quaint little place on the head of Wellesley Island. So I definitely check it out if you're in the area.
Yeah, and it had the common in the middle, and like you said before about the new gazebo there in Waddington, they have a very sizable gazebo there. But when you go into Fineview, I honestly feel like I'm going in a place back in time. Like I used to play a board game when I was a kid called Candyland that had that kind of ornate look to it. That's what it looks like. It looks like just like something out of March of the Wooden Soldiers, only in color, obviously.
Just so you know, I played that as a kid too. You know, it's a
did you play
timeless game.
Candyland? I just always assumed that board games are a thing of the past because the video games have replaced them. But that's good to know. Candyland was. Did you ever play Monopoly at all?
Yeah. I've actually got a Beatles Monopoly game.
A Beatles Monopoly game.
Yeah.
I know they also adapted Monopoly to the township. I'm sure Watertown had its own Monopoly game.
Right.
Which, now they're changing things over to be politically correct, but we won't get into it.
Not a bad idea for the St. Lawrence Seaway Monopoly game.
Hey.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea, considering all the movers and shakers that we had. Is there a famous cemetery for all the famous people that lived there? Or is in fact all the people that made big waves, if you will, as seasonal residents there, were they buried somewhere else where they lived for the most part throughout the year?
The only thing I can think of right now that kind of would bring all the things we've kind of been talking about together. Jane Fonda's mother.
Yeah.
Spent the last few years of her life in the psychiatric center in Ogdensburg. And she was buried in Ogdensburg. So I believe, Henry Fonda would have been her husband, Peter and Jane, their kids.
Right.
If I recall,
it's amazing you know that, Alex.
Yes. Is she in an unmarked grave across the street? Is that the one I'm thinking?
I don't believe she's unmarked.
Okay.
Because her daughter, Jane, has, whenever she comes, she goes to the same bed and breakfast. And this was in the news a few years ago when she came and visited her, because I think she comes every year to do flowers.
Right.
And the bed and breakfast guy keeps his mouth shut. And she comes, does her thing, stays for a couple nights, leaves, and then it's in the news 2 days after she's already left. And that's the way she likes it.
She's gone before anyone knew it.
Yep.
It's amazing. I've often felt, again, we talked about this area being non-judgmental. Wade Boggs came up to Clayton about maybe 15, 16 years ago, famous baseball player and all. He went to the Clipper Inn And a famous,
Yep.
right there on
Very
Route
good.
12.
Very
And
good.
one of the best restaurants probably in the whole state.
Sponsored.
Yeah, exactly. So he was there with his family, and he told the waitress after all was said and done, he says, "Hey, thanks for not drawing any attention to me," because obviously someone was, "Hey, can I get your autograph?" and would draw attention to, "Hey, Wade Boggs is here." So he appreciated the fact that she didn't do that. Of course, she didn't know who he was. So again, that's a typical example. And even if she did, I just think that when it comes down to it, when celebrities up here, we have Viggo Mortensen's from the area, Richard Grieco, with so many other people that have lived here at one time or another. But we don't seem to be fazed by celebrities up here. Do you ever see that, Josh? Or Alex?
So many new faces coming through the
Right.
area that you just go about your day. And people like to be left alone, but there's also so many places to hide up here. If
That's
you
true.
have a boat that's navigable and can get with a shallow draft into some of these spots in the river, you could hide from anybody.
Right.
And that makes the smuggling and the drug moving pretty significant too.
It did, yeah.
But I think that also resonates when people from the North Country go to different places. Perfect example. I was walking with my family probably close to 7 years ago in Central Park, right? And we were going to take a picture in front of the famous eatery there, Tavern on the Green.
Yeah, sure.
And so, of course, we have 3 people in my family. My mom's like, "Oh, you 3 go." 4 people in my family. My mom's like, "Oh, you guys, I'll take the picture." And this guy is sitting there reading a book, and he goes, "Oh, I'll take the picture for you." And my mom's like, "No, it's fine, it's fine." I go, "Mom, do you know who that is?" She's like, "No." And I still to this day don't know what his name is. He if you saw him, he's in so many movies.
Oh,
But
we get it.
anyway, he was the guy who was asking, "Hey, can I take your picture, or whatever?" And I go, "Dad, that's that guy, blah, blah, blah."
Wow.
Right? And my dad goes, "Oh, all right." And my dad just walked up to him and said, "Have I seen you somewhere before?" And the guy goes, "I don't know, maybe." He goes, "I like your movies." Shook his hand and we just walked away. It wasn't like, "Oh, can we take a picture with you," or
Right.
whatever. And the ironic thing was the guy was asking us if we needed him to take a picture of our family,
Yep.
But I think it transcends. I think it's just the same type of thing we were talking about last episode. People up here just, we want to help people who are coming through, and we want to let them have a good experience while they are here.
Oh, wait, before we move on, we're going to find out who was Delroy Linda.
You've seen that guy.
I have seen that guy too. Do you see, from both your vantage points, guys, do you see new investments coming this way? Is Marriott planning on building a hotel? There was talks about that years ago. Does the Hilton family have any interest up here? Is there any means of building the next Frontenac Hotel on the St. Lawrence River, Josh?
I think it's an interesting concept, but I almost would be more interested in having the local businessmen and businesswomen establish those places to go stay and to have fun. And the people that are from here and the local populace would almost be better suited to put those kind of events on and welcome those people. Build those hotels, maybe.
I
Give them the
agree.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is so cool about an island, you can almost create in a whole nother world, right? Just something I have thought about in daydreams, right?
Yeah.
I would love to rebuild the mansion on Ogden Island, but rebuild it even bigger and make it a hotel. And then on that 3 miles of island, have a 36-hole golf course. And I've always thought if there was some type of wood boat service that would take you from the mainland over, and of course this is, not, 16-year-old Alex thinking this, right? You had to wear a tuxedo, type of stuff like that to be in the ballroom.
Right.
But this was the thing. It would still be affordable so that the common guy could take his son golfing on the island, an international golf course, create that world where they could feel fancy and feel served and feel, for a day, and still have it not hurt the bank,
Well, first of all, Wellesley Island has 3 golf courses.
Beautiful.
And if you go, and they're beautiful because there's one municipal, there's the 19-hole golf course there, and of course there's the TI Club. But if you go downstream, you go to was it Sandy Islands? Or is it Stony Islands? Excuse me, which is what you see off Henderson. You see Galoo, and believe it or not, from space, or at least from Google Maps, you can see what was a 9-hole golf course, and it was owned by Phillips 66 or some oil company owned it, and they still do, I believe. But just you'll see these islands, you figure there's just nothing else other than snakes and birds and whatnot. But people really establish them as not only for their homes, but they put golf courses on them. We
That's
couldn't
a great
do that
idea.
today.
That's a great idea for unimproved, large, grassy islands. That's a great idea. So for the hotels, you wouldn't have to recreate the entire size of that hotel. Say, for instance, the one on the Frontenac Hotel on Round Island. Maybe a smaller, miniature version of that, just a throwback to make it mirror that. But the space is there. Some people have these cottages that almost look like humongous hotels and sprawling spaces, but that's half the fun, is to get in the boat and drive around and see what sprawling complexes these people have built on tiny little rock outcroppages. And I think they have Peach Island is out near Crossover Island, so big stretch of river. It's I believe it's the only man-made island on the Seaway, and other than Sunken Rock Lighthouse that they brought in some stuff to build up so they could be used as an operating lighthouse. But people just will build right out to the edges of that water and the rock, just peering over, and a swift gale might knock it right over into the water. But they use all that available space, and I don't think there's much real estate that's not been developed. But yeah.
What's the running joke on the Uncle Sam's boat tour? Is that little tiny
Mother-in-law
house that's on that
island,
the mother,
yeah.
And then Bolt Castle, and then George built this for his mother-in-law. And it's literally like water slapping the side of the cottage.
And by the way, when my mom went up there back in the 90s, she didn't appreciate that. It's funny how women are just very testy, because a woman is a mother-in-law to some degree, so they feel like it's a joke against themselves. But mother-in-laws get the bad end of the stick. There's no doubt about it. You guys are young guys. And it's amazing how much you do know about history. And as you get older, you're going to learn a lot more about it. So we have to keep this going, obviously. There's been books written about Watertown. There's been books written about the Thousand Islands, pictorial books, something that you'd see on a coffee table and whatnot. That's all fine and dandy. But should we enter the realm of adding this to the curriculum to our local schools about the history of our area, particularly the Thousand Islands, Alex?
I've always thought that local history should be part of the curriculum. The problem is, the more that the state gets involved with what you're supposed to do with regencies and whatnot, it doesn't allow for that to be, it's not testable information. So the teacher isn't going to teach something that isn't testable, right?
Right.
I've always thought local history should be part of the curriculum, because it's so important to know not only where you live, but kind of what you came from, what you came up in, and knowing that you're also part of that history.
Big time. Yeah. Even if you're a transplant, even if you're not, like myself. But the paper industry up here, just the names. Knowlton is the longest existing, or oldest operating, I should say, paper mill in the world, and it's right there in Factory Street. Started in 1805, and it's been making paper products since, which is incredible. But it's the same thing with Thousand Islands. It's the same thing with Jefferson County, and for that matter, you look at other parts of the state where the Adirondacks had their heyday, and we mentioned earlier Lake Placid is seeing some ups and downs as well. But it's a Northeast issue, and it's as things get older homes, people start gravitating to other areas, particularly before COVID. But I'm going to be very optimistic, guys. COVID was a horrible thing. Over 500,000 people died in this country alone, millions around the world. It was a 100-year pandemic. But at the end of the day, we're going to see a resurgence of more and more people living in the region. Instead of going to Europe, instead of going to Arizona or wherever for their family vacay, they might put the money right back here. So you see that yourself, Josh.
Yes, I think people in the North Country, it's either a mixture of maple syrup or something in their blood that doesn't allow them to be down south for too long.
No,
you just get too hot.
Yeah.
So you come up here, and the benefit is, in 20 minutes with a canoe rack, you can go hit the river or the inland lakes. It's just getting the word out there that people know that that's available to them. Like I said, 20 minutes and you are at a boat launch or at a private property, or even if your boat is moored on a dock on the river, and you take 3 hours to barrel up and down the river, you're going to see so many sights. So it's all there at your fingertips. You just have to go start the engine and go.
Right. And we often talk about jobs and industries to come up here, but tourism is a huge industry. So the more and more people that would come up here between May and October, that would just create more jobs and more hotels. Again, being optimistic. Alex, what are your thoughts?
I like to look at history to show what's going to happen in the future. I mean, we're talking about 100-year pandemic, right? When was the last pandemic?
1917, 1918.
Yeah. The Roaring 20s.
Yeah.
What did we just talk about? All these people that came up here and built these houses.
Interesting.
And all this stuff, right?
Very interesting.
Think about before that, when the Adirondacks had their big thing. There's the panic of 1893. That's like the pre-depression, the thing that was basically like, hey, we're gonna have a depression in a few years.
Roswell Flower helped Wall Street out big time and gave them millions of dollars to get them out of it.
Exactly.
From
JP Morgan, same, it's these things that, out of chaos. World War II. Oh my God.
Yeah.
After World War II, we had the 50s.
Right.
Elvis Presley.
Right,
all this stuff, So
Huge expansion in America.
I think we're gonna really benefit from this this bounce back. And like I said, I look to the history, I look to the past for what we can expect in the future, and that's why we study it.
Yeah. And by the way, this is happening because you talk to any realtor. Vicky Stay was here a couple of weeks ago, and she's saying great things. And it's happening everywhere, not just on the river, because you think, oh, the river's going to be first. But there's homes right here in Watertown. And I asked the question, so who's buying all these homes? I'm just curious because, in sales all my life, I just would like to know. And it's just people, downsizing or upgrading or moving on to other opportunities. But a lot of people are coming from other regions. And like you said, and both of you guys can agree, there's something in the blood of a Northeastern person that it's really nice to go to the other side of the fence. That could be Tennessee, the Carolinas, a lot of Carolina, a lot of natives of rather northern New York moving down there. But it seems like they're slowly but surely coming back up here. So, which is great because our greatest resource are our kids. We've heard that a million times. It's very cliche. But we have the best school system in the planet. There's no question. Up here, you see the facilities. I just did a football game yesterday at Carthage, at synthetic field, the lights, all of that. Your taxpayers' dollars are going towards a great cause. But it's just, you hate to see this exodus of a kid graduating either high school or college and not staying here. So, but you guys have, Alex. You stayed here.
Well, here's what I actually did some extensive work with the IDA, the Industrial Development Agency up in St. Lawrence County, and what we were trying to figure out was how do we get people to come here and how do we get people to come back here?
Right.
People who have moved away, because for a long time I've heard this phrase: our biggest export in the North Country is our youth. Right. Well, after doing some more studying, we actually want to export our youth. We want to export the people who are coming out of high school. But you got to look at what we're getting in return. About 10 years down the road, when they're hitting their early 30s and they've been in the urban areas for, about a decade, they're going to have that natural want to either come back home or come back to a place like they grew up.
Right.
If they enjoyed the time that they did here.
Right.
In order to raise their own families. So, yes, we're exporting our youth. I think it's good too, because guess what? We're losing someone who has the equivalent of a high school degree.
Right.
When that 30-year-old's coming back, they were getting a 30-year-old with 10 years experience, a bachelor's degree, maybe a master's degree, and is going to do something and be productive in society up here.
I've never heard it that way, Alex. So you're saying that it's a good thing for someone to sow their wild oats, so to speak, go elsewhere and come back with the fruits of their rewards are what they've learned elsewhere, and they come back with all that.
And they come back with capital.
Right.
They come back with something, and guess what? They've been living in the city for the last 10 years. They're used to spending a certain amount of money on regular things. They come back up here, they're like, oh my God, this is so cheap.
Yeah, that's the trend now. Yeah. Especially due to COVID. People are leaving those built-up areas.
Yeah.
It's called the brain gain.
Brain gain. Is that the actual term, brain gain?
So there's a professor. His name is Winchester. I remember because of the rifle. Ben Winchester. He's out of, I believe, University of Wisconsin. He actually came up here to the North Country Symposium 2 years ago. It was part of my job with the IDA to find this guy and bring him up here to give a talk about it, to amp people up about this stuff. And everyone's always talking about the brain drain because all their kids are graduating, going off to school, and they're not coming back.
Right.
Well, he found, statistically speaking, that if you look down where and when these people are returning back to places like their homes or to their homes, is in that early 30 stage where they've found, a wife or girlfriend, had their first kid, have some capital, and they're looking to go back to a place to be able to raise their kids that isn't, downtown Manhattan.
Fantastic. Again, that is perhaps the most optimistic thing I've ever heard in my life, because typically you hear anyone that leaves, they leave and they don't come back. But in essence, they do come back, but they come back much more well-rounded, if you will.
The issue is we have to find a way to get them to come back here. Right. A lot of people are choosing Vermont, places that are like here, but, have been, these other places have found a very good way of giving themselves if you want a rural life and a good life, come to Vermont. Well, how do we become the poor person's Vermont? Or a version of that.
And it's interesting because the dynamics between Vermont and New Hampshire, live free or die, and just play hacky sack. It's funny how those they coexist together like that. Well, we've been talking about the history. We went off the river, if you will, the beaten trail, which way you want to look at it. But that's what it's all about, because once you have a discussion about anything, I'm 58 years old. You guys are in your 20s, and you bring up a lot. You're both in your...
I'm nearly 40.
You're nearly 40. Well, you look like you're in your 20s. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. That was a compliment. But you're young guys. There's no question, just like the guy who owns this place.
Yes.
The young blood, the young spirit is what we need, and your family men and whatnot. And that's what it's all about. I know, again, that's just a passive way of saying you guys are great and whatnot.
There was a guy I ran into 3 years ago, Princeton grad.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I just wanted a place to raise my family. And I stumbled upon the North Country. And now I own, he's like, I could never have bought a house from the 1850s that is pretty refurbishable, but still able to keep the history, because he's a history like nerd, right? Just like me. And he's like, I could have never found something like this in downtown Manhattan. It would have been knocked down 100 years ago, you know, or even where I'm from in New Haven, you know. So it's like he's able to bring the capital and the intellectual wisdom that he has made.
So they're coming back all over the place. But other people's despair, if you will, because a lot of cities are under turmoil right now. That's their own doing, in my opinion. But we benefit from that, guys, and that's hopefully that will continue here.
Like we said, hopefully, in the near to far-reaching future, taxes will stay manageable.
Yeah, right.
And the trend is towards a gig economy, so you could be geographically independent, work on your little tiny house on an island somewhere,
right,
and upload all the work that you need to be doing to your employer, or if you're self-employed, you could be anywhere you want to be.
Yeah, and we're going to get more internet, apparently, thanks to Congress. So there is yeah, exactly, more and more, and we need it, because believe it or not, there are certain areas you can't even use a cell phone up here, which is awful. Thanks, guys, and that was our second episode of Living on the St. Lawrence River. I'm Glenn Curry for Josh Todd and Alex Hammond. Thanks again, guys, for another great episode, and we'll see you soon, everybody.
What a great discussion once again. Unfortunately, there was never enough time to talk about the St. Lawrence River, especially its history. I'm Lori Doldo. We thank you for watching, and we encourage you to see us soon for our next episode of The River, Living the St. Lawrence.
Thank you to our sponsors, Mattress Express, Marble Key Realty, Big Apple Music, Armageddon Arsenal Supply, Tremblay Handyman Services, and Lake Ontario Realty. Serving the region for 18 years, Lake Ontario Realty is once again the volume leader in Northern New York for the 4th straight year. They worked hard to be number one, serving all of Northern New York, including the St. Lawrence River and the Eastern Ontario communities. See them on Facebook and online at lakeontariorealty.com.